would you define P zombies to be?
Well, I just got a question before we start continue. Like, do you give consent to be recorded? Sorry, holy shit. Do you give consent for this to be recorded? Or no?
No. I
No.
mean, if you want it to be recorded, we can just debate, and we can have a judge. But I don't really care to debate this because
I
it's
mean,
not
it's
really
just
a
a
relevant
discussion.
topic.
I mean, it's just a discussion. I mean, like the reason why I'm recording is because, like, content-wise, I mean, like, it's not necessarily like saying, "Oh yeah, I beat you." I'm just like trying to get some content because my YouTube has been dead recently. So I mean, like, that's about it.
I mean, sure, man. We can record it. I don't really think it's relevant to record because it's kind of straightforward. But sure.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to P zombies, I think, of course, when someone imagines P zombies, they try and think of a possibility or a world in which they have a beings with no type of consciousness, but is capable of existing and, of course, having the same physical facts as ours, which is obviously the grounding premises for, of course, P zombies in like basic wise or just how you refer to the concept. And I think when it comes to that, they try and restrain or regress the idea of contradictions involving within that. But necessarily speaking, I think that just mainly presupposes like the possibility in itself, of course, is capable of existing in that factor. Because when like I can explain real quick, because like I know there can be some type of semantical confusion with, of course, conceiving of a world and then sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, this world is concrete." So I'm gonna elaborate. When I say conceivable world, you can think of the world existing in the sense, but I think the world would have to refer to something concrete because of the factor of consciousness and, of course, the contradiction part. The contradiction would have to substitute, of course, to not exist, would obviously have to refer to something concrete in that sense because of consciousness. I think the consciousness would have to be there to prevent any type of contradictions within some type of modal spectrum. So that's my main problem with it. It basically just presupposes it because of the factor of consciousness. And therefore, I think that mainly the main problem is that you obviously have to give an argument for some type of modal realist stance for P zombies as well.
Yeah, like I just disagree with the entire like way you present the argument. So like let's just go down the line of argumentation. So first off, the P zombies argument isn't like a logical issue regarding to some law of logic that's like being presented here or some like logical possibility that's being presented here like very blatantly and just within baked into what the argument entails. It's a metaphysical issue that posits if it is the case, right, that there can be some sort of lacking of this like state, right? But they, go through some sort of like action or existence, right? Or some type of state of affairs. Then it's gonna be the case that um they have these like basically right. What am I trying to get at? I'm basically saying that I don't think that the P zombies argument is a logical issue. It's more so a metaphysical issue because like you can agree that logically speaking, unless you like identify, let's just say you identify some sort of like mental states or some sort of like human state to encompass these traits, right? So, for example, me arguing from a reductive physicalist stance, obviously there would be some logical contradiction entailed, but normatively speaking, like the P zombie argument isn't really a logical issue, it's a metaphysical issue. This is why most like metaphysical physicalists will have an issue with you saying this, but most like people who don't subscribe to metaphysical physicalism won't really care or won't really subscribe to the idea that P zombies attacks their argument because it's just not a logical issue. Like unless you play weirdly with the semantics, as I said earlier, you can't really derive any like you any like logical contradiction from P zombies. The only thing you can do is appeal to some sort of like view based contradiction. So it would be like, as I said earlier, if I was arguing from the standpoint of a reductive physicalist who, dabbles in metaphysical physicalism, then I'd have to account for P zombies in some sort of weird way. But like I said, I'm not a metaphysical physicalist in relation to reductive physicalism, so I don't understand where the actual logical issue is being derived here. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, I had to talk to my aunt. Mainly, I'll just bring up one of the things you said. You said it's a logical issue. No, I don't think my semantics would refer to any type of in accordance with the logical issue. The reason why.
I didn't say it was a listen. I didn't say it
Hold on,
was a
hold on,
logical issue.
hold on, hold on.
Yeah, listen. You're
Hold on.
okay. You're already
I
yeah.
know, no, no,
Listen.
no, no. I know what you said. I know what you said. I'm trying to clarify for what my semantics thing account for specifically. Um, the factor is that of course you would talk about a metaphysical problem, right? And that's the reason why, of course, my semantics brought in some type of modal realist thing, and where they assumes some type of concrete existence for another possible world, where it's of course logically possible, and that would fit under the laws of logic. So I don't think it's a logical problem, which would not conflate, sorry, conflict with these specific laws. So of course that's obviously going to be the case that does not obviously commit to any type of logical problem there is. But in that factor, when it comes to P zombies, again, you would have to also assume another world exists, which of course there would be, of course, in terms of consciousness and like obviously capable beings of existing without like consciousness or capable of roaming around. That's like the entire idea of P zombies. And again, if you want to sit there and say, oh yeah, mainly speaking wise, hold on, let me just retract what I was saying. Yeah. Um, Mainly speaking wise, when you refer to a reductive physicalist stance, of course, yeah, there would be obvious contradictions with, of course, assuming, oh yeah, P zombies would be capable of fitting into that stance. I would agree with that factor of an example. But mainly, I think the main issue is that I think when it refers to logical possibility, I think, of course, there's different stances upon the modality here. I think what I'm getting at is that the argumentation are just more so like the metaphysical problem also assumes modality in that terms of a realist stance. What I'm trying to factor out is that why would it not be some type of modal stance and why would it refer to our specific world? Because I know, yeah, you could sit there and say, oh, yeah, consciousness exists in our world, therefore that can negate another possible world. But again, we're also accounting for another possible world with the same physical facts as ours. Consciousness would exist, right? So I think that's pretty negotiable under those terms. And I think we would also have to account for specifically, of course, the modality problem, as I mentioned, which is the presupposition for that specific thing. So, like, again, I think what needs to be addressed is the modality problem and not nothing else, which involves, of course, some type of thing within our world. If you can tell me why P zombies could, of course, refer to our world and specifically, of course, account for some type of ontological parsimonious view where other possible worlds are obviously not the case because that would add more quantifiers and entities. So, yeah.
Like, dude, this literally doesn't like it isn't relevant at all to P zombies. Like, I don't know if you're just like, and this is why I didn't want to like go on this like entire like debate thing because you're gonna try to like win an argument that just isn't winnable. But sure, I'll like re-clarify since you're saying like blatantly like false things. So, for example, you're saying that I have to address a modality issue or bring up some modality in reference to P zombies. Even assuming I did have to do this, right? I could just say that's a metaphysical issue under metaphysical modality, which is what I've said for like 3 times by now. And you saying that there is some logical like contradiction. Again, the only way you can ever derive some type of logical contradiction from P zombies is just you like making some definition of humans or some type of like giving humans some nature that's going to entail this thing. So as I said, right, if you were to argue as a reductive physicalist and you gave like let's just say you gave some sort of like um argument, right, that says, well, humans can only have these specific brain states in accordance to some sort of like physical attribute and then you were to argue P zombies where they don't have like these, they have these identical states, but they have some sort of like, lack of consciousness or whatever the fuck, right? Then obviously that's going to bring some problems. And I'm saying that in the event where this is true, it's only going to hinge upon a reductive physicalist entailing the position of metaphysical physicalism, which obviously, as I said prior, isn't even relevant to the conversation because that's the only parameter in which it would be entailed from a feel of the mind perspective where P zombies is even relevant. If you're not going against that stance, or rather, if no one is taking the stance of metaphysical physicalism in relation to reductive physicalism. I mean, hell, there might be another stance, but I'm just not informed of one. Then, from my knowledge, yeah, I don't see why that's this is going to be some logical issue, because you do realize that for it to be a logical contradiction, or for you to bring in it being some type of logical issue, it would have to not be in adherence to the three laws of logic, and none of the three laws of logic are being violated here, prima facie. Which is why I said, unless you want to grant that there is some, unless you want to grant that there is some definition of the mind or a human, right, that coincides with there being a logical issue. Like, we could just say the law of identity, or let's say we identify a human as X, and X traits are going to be um encompassing of some sort of traits that cannot exist under the P zombies argument. Then obviously I say it's entailed to be a logical issue, but most people would not grant some sort of definition that entails a logical contradiction, which is why I said it's a metaphysical issue. And obviously, this can be accounted for under modality as well. I could just say that it's a metaphysical issue, since that's what philosophy of the mind normally, comes down to: metaphysical cores, not logical cores.
Yeah, to respond towards that, one, I don't think we were talking about specific contradictions within B zombies. We're just talking about the standards, what the argument entails. Secondly, for another response to that specific thing, again, that's the reason why I said that this would be some type of metaphysical issue because, again, P zombies assumes the existence of another world with counterfactual, not counterfactual, sorry, basically just relative identical physical facts within it. So like say for an example, you can sit there and say, oh yeah, this X exists in another possible world and X exists in another possible world, the same like some type of like identical thing within these said possible worlds. That's like the whole point about that within P Zombies is that again it talks about something being able to conceivable. It's another possible world, and again that's the main issue. Again, it's not necessarily like it kind of is like a thought experiment, but again you're trying to stipulate it with another possible world. I think when it comes to consciousness, I think a reductive physicalist stance, as you like mentioned, would bring up a contradiction in that, and I think, therefore, that limits the idea of another thought experimental world where it's just more, of course, sensical or coherent to talk about consciousness within another, like our own possible world, which is much more, of course, coordinated in terms of epistemology about the mind, and that, of course, consciousness being a part of that. So, again, I think even then, like you were mentioning the logical problems, yeah, because the reason why I would also say it's inclusive more towards, of course, like the metaphysical problem, as I already granted, is because it still presupposes some type of logical possibility concretely existing for consciousness. I even dubbed this out in the beginning. I said consciousness would have to exist inside a specific possible world, making it, of course, concrete in that sense, because we're talking about consciousness existing in that sense, and of course, trying to prove it's an immaterialistic worldview, right? That's why I dubbed that out in the beginning, and I don't think this conversation is gonna like really get anywhere if we keep just saying, "Oh yeah, this is entailing this, this is entailing that," right? I think mainly, as I said, what isn't being addressed is just the modality part, where I said it's presupposing modality, and I think, of course, talking about consciousness inside our own world is much more valid than a thought experiment stipulating another possible world. So, if anything, I think this conversation has taught us that I think mainly the justification or just substance for my proposition in general is much more coherent in a stance for understanding P zombies as a thought experiment for consciousness, of course. I mean, like, you could sit here and say, oh, yeah, well, I basically just pointed out that, this, and that in your argument. Sure, you can dub those. I don't really have any type of hatred for you, like, I just think if this conversation doesn't derive towards modality as a metaphysical problem, of course, which is the presupposed realist stance, I don't think we could be anywhere about P zombies. So I mean, I guess we can like save the recording because like I don't think you would even want to talk about the metaphysical realist thing, the possible worlds yet.
I
So
mean, what do you think? Okay, I'll just ask you this question: what is the relevance towards the metaphysical, modality thing. Like, do you think that metaphysical modality, do you think that metaphysical modality isn't going to be relevant here?
No, I don't think it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be irrelevant. Mainly I'll clarify real quick again. Sorry if I'm yapping a lot. It's just, of course, like I'm in a really crowded room space. But the main problem I'm referring to is just, of course, modality in general, like the realist stance. I'm trying to limit talk about consciousness to one possible world. That's what I'm trying to say is just much more justifiable in terms of against a negation towards P zombies and understanding P zombies, because I think like one of the main points within the debate was trying to understand P zombies. What's the, of course, the analytics for it? What's the thought experiment? And mainly speaking wise, of course, the presupposition problem where I said, oh yeah, P zombies presupposes other worlds exist, and I think there needs to be some type of argument which grants concrete worlds would be able to exist to stipulate P zombies for an immaterialistic stance fulfiller for that. So in that part, I think, of course, that would be relevant, and that also brings in physical modality because, of course, that is types of natures of consciousness. Of course, that's mainly other possible worlds where consciousness would be dubbed in or designated in. So that would be definitely something to adhere to. Just take your time. I'm not gonna rush you. Before you get back, I'm probably gonna go take a glass of water. So yeah. Oh, yeah, I just realized I'm forgetting to keep my mic open so this recording bot doesn't go. Shit. Oh, my back fucking hurts.
Yo, hello. Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, yeah. Do you need like a recapping of what I said, or did you get it down?
No, I just think that like the whole thing in reference to like you speaking like in relation to modality isn't going to be like an issue here because as I said, right, you're trying to invoke some type of like parsimony by not going into any external world. And like I don't think modality in a general sense is going to actually invoke this like some like non parsimonious like entity because like let's just say for example, right, if we're strictly speaking in relation to reality, I still don't get how like P zombies as a concept because I'm not arguing for P zombies nor am I arguing that P zombies is true. I'm just saying that the nature of which you are trying to invoke like a refutation to P zombies is just false because as I said, right, P zombies isn't a logical issue. That's the main point of contention. That's the main claim that I'm going against. I don't like care if it's true or not. I don't care if the if it can be actualized. I'm saying the nature of the thought experiment itself in which you describe it is false. Because in chat, and I told you this, it is false to make the claim that P zombies is a logical issue unless there's a conditional. If you defined the identity of a human to be in this specific way, but typically that's not what philosophy of the mind deals with. It deals with the consciousness of said being entirely. So, for example, you basically like let's just recap because P zombies is logically coherent. Like I don't know if you are tracking this, but what I'm saying is there is no logical contradiction with assuming P zombies, right? There is no P and not P logically speaking. If you go under the three laws of logic and you run the P zombies argument through each law of logic, there is no contradiction entailed. So what I'm saying is that it wouldn't be a logical issue, it would be a metaphysical issue if you're speaking in reference to contradiction. Because once again, it cannot be the case that P zombies is logically incohesive, or rather, there is a logical issue in relation to logical contradictions if it does not create these logical contradictions. Like for example, and like literally, I named this because you're like going on these like rants or like these tangents about like modality and how we shouldn't invoke unparsimonious amounts of entities, which already itself, begs the question on some sort of explanatory power being equal. But even like distinct from that, because as I said, it's irrelevant. If we're just going based off what the argument is supposed to be about, which is the nature of the P zombies argument, I'm simply just denying the claim you made, which is that it's a logical issue because, as I've said for what might be the fifth time, it's not a logical issue. It's logically possible to be the case. So what you would actually be going for in a debate is why it's metaphysically incoherent, why it's metaphysically, contradictory, or not metaphysically possible. Because what the P zombies argument is just a being that is physically identical to us without consciousness. There is no P and not P logically speaking. There is no law of identity it breaks. There is no law of non contradiction. There is no like none of these laws are broken. I know there's a third one, but I don't think I need to name it. It's really irrelevant. All I'm saying is that none of these three laws are broken, and therefore it's logically possible. However, the debate is if it's metaphysically possible, granted the semantics and the empirics that we have to relate to the mind.
Um, to specifically counter one of the things, like that's the reason why I also mentioned I don't think we were going over logical, uh, obvious laws in that sense, of course, because I even granted the metaphysical problem, which you said it's a metaphysical issue, it's a metaphysical thing about consciousness. It's like a thing to deal with consciousness in that sense, and of course,
Wait,
before you say
hello? Can I wait. I don't really mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. This might be the only
you're
time I
fine,
do it, but I just
you're
needed.
fine.
Okay, if you agree that it's a metaphysical problem over a logical problem, then what is the need to continue the like discussion or whatever?
Because mainly the main problem was that I'm saying, oh yeah, because obviously in that sense it presupposes some type of real stance about other possible worlds, and I think I did give an explanation, and that's the main reason why I'm adhering to some specific thing about, of course, oh yeah, I think a reductive physical stance, of course, is definitely able to grant some type of more so thing, and why we should, of course, account for our own of course, world and our own, of course, empirics and epistemology about humans and what consciousness should be dealt with, right? And I think to further answer the question, give like formal clarification, because I think there was definitely a lot missed. I'm not trying to say you're not trying to track or anything. I'm just saying that I think maybe my semantics are being a bit too like excessive. I'm gonna try and like lay off the semantics, and I'll like hopefully I can understand, like I can like explain it, condensedly, but here's like the thing I'm saying. Because P Zombies, of course, tries to stipulate, of course, in the sense where it goes like, oh yeah, it does not break one of the laws of logic, therefore logically possible. But of course, talking about consciousness, of course, right? I don't think these specific possible beings are capable of course, existing, living in that sense within our own possible world. That's the reason why I'm sitting there saying it's logically possible because I don't think
I
there's also no
agree.
logically possible. Like the thing is that I'm saying, of course, in that sense, the reason why it's granted as like logically possible, like I thought it was like indicative, but like maybe I was just missing out on that point. And that's like kind of the reasons why I brought up in the sense of course, the modality point because I think that separates it from, of course, being some type of nomological possibility in the sense where it would deal with the metaphysics within our world. And of course, that's the reason why I'm saying we would have to deal with consciousness within our world. I don't think that's fittable, because clearly we would have to be talking about consciousness. This is definitely stipulated inside some other world because of said metaphysical contradictions with the nature of beings, or some beings identical with us because they don't share any type of qualitative identity. A qualitative identity, formally speaking, of course, is mainly in that sense, something inherently similar, but not exactly. So it's not definitely fitting with the Lebanese thing, but more so, of course, like say for example, a jug of water. The water thing is qualitatively identical to a cup of water, but of course the jug is different, therefore does not grant, of course, x equal y, that type of stuff. So in that sense, to exactly be clear, because of these distinctions in terms of frameworks, I think it was like indicative in that sense, and the reason why I'm saying, oh yeah, that would be granted a real stance, and of course, presupposing that because it talks about stipulating is that another possible world because of this specific being, of course, because the P zombies part, and I was definitely talking about consciousness. Consciousness would have to be there to prevent any type of, contradiction within the frameworks, of course, saying, the same physical facts as ours, and it would definitely have to be there to definitely sit there and say, oh yeah, this is not a distinct world, it's capable of being a metaphysical problem within our world. That's the reason why I said it's a differing world, and that's the reason why I also think it was definitely kind of more so differing in terms of frameworks, because I definitely said that they lack consciousness. And this other thing, of course, the other beings, they have consciousness in that sense, and it's definitely dealing with consciousness, and that's the reason why, of course, I link this, of course, with modality in that sense, and I did say because of the consciousness part, that would have to underline some type of concrete thing to talk about, metaphysically speaking, of course, otherwise that would just be a useless thought experiment to talk about consciousness because of its lack of concrete things. So, again, when dealing with the proposition, I think that's very indicative what I said. So, I mean, like, if you need extra clarification, I can yap again, but I prefer not to because I think I'm kind of running out of breath.
Yeah, like it's just going back to the initial issue here. Like, okay, like I'll say this like once, and then if you give the same rebuttal, I feel like it's non-substantial. Then like we can end it here because like this is like I don't know like if it's me not conveying the point correctly or what, but like dude, I literally said that I'm not arguing for P zombies. I do think that P zombies fails as a thought experiment in what it tries to do. That's not what I'm defending. I sent in chat just in case like we forgot. I said that I had an issue with you saying that the P zombies, like you had an issue with someone saying that the P zombies, like irrelevantly refers to logical possibility. Like it doesn't have anything to do with logical possibility. It's not a logical issue. Like, and I said this multiple times. It has no actual ramifications on the laws of logic. They do not break them. So I don't know where this logical issue is coming from. That's the only proposition I'm combating, the original proposition. So like all this meta debate on like modality and whatnot, I'm just saying even if we do take right via the original thesis, right, which we're working under, which is if the P zombies argument is a logical problem, I disagree because if we take the framework to be true, it's logically possible. Therefore, it would just be the case that if it is logically possible, there has to be another issue with it, and the issue would just stem from the metaphysical ontology of said thing. It wouldn't be stemming from some logical like ontology. There's a distinction there. So when you refer to P zombies, as well as just philosophy of the mind in general, it usually does not stem from a logical, like it does not usually stem into some logical argument. Most of the time, it's going to be metaphysical because when you talk about conceivability, that's metaphysical prowess. That's not some sort. Oh wait, but yeah, I'm saying like that's just some. Wait, hello? Did I like?